Haley Pham released her debut novel, Just Friends, and the internet has a lot of opinions. A lot of it is not very good. I keep seeing reviews on TikTok that I feel are way harsh.
Oh, that was way harsh, Ty.
And because of that, I knew I needed to pick this book up, get my opinions, get my take on the whole thing, and share my thoughts. Especially because I have opinions on book talk, and not all of it is very good. It isn't a surprise that when a YouTuber who has millions of subscribers publishes a book, that the public is going to have maybe mixed emotions, a lot more leaning towards the negative side. And I feel like Haley Pham's Just Friends is definitely not an exception to that. I, for one, am really excited to read this book. I'm going into it with a lot of optimism and just pure excitement because I always want to see new authors succeed. Publishing your first book, publishing a book in general, is just such a crazy, cool, and amazing opportunity. And no matter if there are some things that need to be fixed for next time or whatever the case may be, everything at the end of the day is a learning experience, and people could just be a lot more nice when it comes to that. But anyway, today has been such a beautiful day. I'm going to keep on reading and then share my thoughts. Okay, I read up to chapter 5 yesterday, and I have to say that I'm enjoying this book. I gave my little spiel about chapters 1 through 5, and I completely forgot that I have to tell you a little bit about the book, right? So the chapters 1 through 5, I found very enjoyable. You get a little bit of background of the main character, why she's revisiting her hometown, what's going on in her personal life, and then who she stumbles upon when she tries to find employment. And of course, I feel like everybody should know that this is a second chance romance. So the person who's the manager at the coffee shop is actually her ex-best friend. Slay! Oh, I'm so happy for her. And I left off at the part where she did her interview. She was a little sassy, but for good reason. That man was acting like he didn't even know her. And yeah, I'm gonna continue reading this today, and I have a feeling that it's going to be really good. Before I do so, I'm gonna give you a little bit of my comments. I never look at reviews whenever I am debating picking up a book. I truly love to go into books blindly. It's one of my favorite things ever to come across a quote that I feel so attached to or intrigued by, and then from that single sentence reading a whole book because of it. I don't go on Goodreads or Google and search up what the plot is about, what the rating is, and honestly that so far hasn't failed me. For the first time, I saw a lot of reviews about this book way before I even had the chance to read it, and I watched them because a lot of reviews became really popular and there was a humongous discourse around this book and reviews. And because I did see a little bit of what was going on online about this book, there are a couple of sentences and moments of this book that I do know of, not anything in depth or about the book itself other than it's friends to lovers or second chance romance. I really don't care how books play out as long as it's good. I have a favorite trope, it's enemies to lovers, but I'm not picky about what the plot is about. And if I don't like something, then I'm not going to keep reading it or choose to read something that isn't my style. Before I get into the criticisms of this book, I really do want to say that I am enjoying Haley Pham's writing. I mean, the very first paragraph she writes, and this is in quotes, "The kind of love that burrows so deep it transforms you. If you lose it, it feels like losing a part of yourself too." That was a quote from her aunt. And then the narrator goes, "That feeling is personified in my stomach right now." That is the second sentence of the paragraph, and there was a lot of discourse around that little baby sentence, but I feel like it encapsulates that emotion so well, where somebody is communicating to you something so profound as the feeling of love. And love is an abstract feeling, and yet the author chooses to personify that feeling in your belly. So when that feeling about love gets personified in your belly, to me, I just imagine like the butterflies are taking over in your stomach. I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's a bad sentence. I don't think it's that dramatic to talk about. And then it continues, and not in the way I expected her advice to come true about some boy, about Declan. Instead, that full-bodied, love-fueled fear was stirring awake because of her. So it's this raw emotion that this person is feeling. And because it's so raw, so real, it's all happening in her stomach. And I really love this sentence. It goes, "The call ends and I swallow hard, readjusting my grip on the steering wheel." Just the entire time that I'm reading this book, I feel like she personifies every single moment so well, and I'm using personified for a reason because the imagery is just so clear and vivid that when you're reading it, I can, like a movie, picture it in my head. I do want to talk a little bit about certain criticism that this book has had, which I just don't agree with. For example, the most notable criticism this book has had was a sentence. I know you guys know this sentence. "The conglomerate of pedestrians. I have to yield to a conglomerate of pedestrians almost every 10 feet. don't kill me, but I don't think that's horrible. Before she shares that sentence, the paragraph is quite literally about this town that is a small town, but also gets filled with tourists. And I feel like because you already have that history of a lot of details and personification in the earlier pages, this sentence to me doesn't really feel out of place, I would say. I feel like it is very cohesive, especially within that paragraph where she goes to explain that this town, this bookstore, is literally only open during tourist season. I think about Monterey, California because I've gone on its off season or when there's a huge convention going on. The last time I went there was for Monterey Car Week, and when I tell you there was so many people that you couldn't even go on the sidewalk, and you couldn't go right below the sidewalk because of how many cars were parked. So you literally had to walk on the street. And even if there isn't an event going on, I could just imagine Monterey in their little boutique area during the weekend or when it's summer, it gets pretty packed. And that's just what I imagine. So I feel like it made sense to me. A lot of people online also talk about how Haley Pham uses difficult language. I don't find any of the words difficult to understand. I think reading this book is very easy. There are bigger words, but in my opinion, I don't really think they're that big. But then again, I also really do love classics. That was my first introduction to books. So I feel like I have a little bit more experience with actually difficult. There was a paragraph that I thought was a little funky, but that was one paragraph in 5 chapters. I instantly get lost surveying his recent developments. In the 4 years since I've seen him, his face has stretched tight over the angular planes of his cheekbones. I think that paragraph, I can see what people are talking about when they say it's a bit wordy. In this paragraph, I can see how the words don't necessarily flow. Like when you're talking about somebody's face and you're attracted to them, I feel like you want to use words that kind of show how beautiful that person is. And I feel with this one, it was just a little bit angular developments, stretched tight. Maybe that roughness was on purpose because she might find him attractive even now, but there's history there, and history she wanted to forget or is unhappy about. Again, I'm not sure yet, I haven't finished the book. And then when it gets to the first flashback, I absolutely had such a fun time reading that. The dialogue was so much fun. I feel as though I can see the character I imagine act these out in my brain. And I know a lot of people can do that, like have a movie in their head, but I don't typically have movies in my head. So when the dialogue or the description is so well to the point that I can do that for myself, it makes me really enjoy a book. And I feel like their relationship was so cutely written in their flashback scenes. A lot of people would also question, like, I would never get a job where my ex would work at. Like, I would never do this. And I totally get that. Maybe I wouldn't either. But at the same time, like, a lot of people would never do things. But that's the entire reason why we have books and why we have movies. Also, I feel like I know a couple of people who would do that to just torture their ex, you know? So even if you wouldn't do that, why hate on the book just for that? I don't know. Maybe I'm getting a little defensive over the book. I don't know. But I'm really enjoying it. That's pretty much all the comments that I have. I only got up to chapter 5 and I love it so far. I mean, I'm really enjoying it. I haven't had the chance to read that much today, but I got up to chapter 8 while I've been laying on my bed, and there's a scene where both characters are vulnerable with each other, and I really enjoyed reading that. Blair is going through quite a hard time with her family, and when it flashes back to their past, both of them have troubles with their own families, so it's something that they finally got to talk about with each other after years of friendship, and I really liked how it played out. I feel like when it comes to friendships, at least some of them, you don't necessarily tell your whole life story to people. At least I don't. I could relate to that. So I found it really relatable that years later, you have this one moment where you guys just finally talk about something that maybe is traumatic or it's something very pertinent to your personality, your character, your story. One thing I will say about having seen so many reviews, I feel like that gets put into my head. So whenever I see a word that's a bit more on the formal side, or I'm really enjoying the plot and I start thinking, oh my gosh, is this when it's gonna take a turn for the bland? I don't really like having those thoughts when I read a book, so I'm disappointed that there were just so many opinions that just got very popular and as a result just became the face of this book. I don't really think it's taking away that much from my experience. I am really enjoying this and I'm going to keep going so I can finish this book by Sunday. So I finally finished the book and I really enjoyed it. I want to talk a little bit about the plot because I know that's something that a lot of people talk about in their reviews, where they say it falls short, where the main conflict isn't really that serious. Understand where some people are coming from for sure, but I genuinely just think that this book is, like I mentioned, pretty simple and it states everything quite clearly. And because the perspective is from Blair, you really come to understand where she's coming from, why she makes decisions. I think it's just quite simple. I'm not sure if this is exactly what people are doing, but from a couple of reviews that I've seen, I feel as though some people are making this book out to be a little bit more than it is. And I hope you're able to follow me on this because I'm not quite sure how to articulate exactly what I'm thinking. The book is about high school best friends who end up falling in love with each other. And because of the ignorance of the youth, not only do they ruin their relationship, they ruin their friendship for the next 4 years because they separate for college. And then by happenstance, the main character goes back to her hometown, rekindles her relationship, and it all works out. It's a very clear, straightforward, and simple romance novel. And that's literally all this book is. And I'm not saying it's perfect, but it hits its mark. I enjoy the fact that these characters are both immature with their feelings. And it's so clear because this is high school we're talking about. I don't think anyone is well-rounded with their emotions when they're 12 years old, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, maybe even 20 years old. I think that's just the course of life. And I think that this book captured it very well, where something so minuscule broke these people up. And it's not that it was small, like it wasn't important, because each person had reasons behind why they were frustrated with one another. You have Blair, who was really focused on creating her own identity, and not for her own sake, but for her mother's, for her family's, for financial reasons. She avoided her own dreams for the sake of making money and being able to retire her mother. And then Declan, similarly battling with his own problems with his family and then losing his future, essentially, which was not only his and his family's, but also Blair's as well. Those situations were so important for the characters. Well, I mean, it ended their relationship. But again, when you're young, these things are so important, that communicating something that feels so real and so important to you, and even so obvious, like you don't want to do that. And they didn't. And then she basically ran away to college, which was fine. That's what she was planning on doing. I want to talk about the characters specifically one by one because I feel like it's really important that I say my opinion when it comes to Blair. I think it's a little important to mention that I really did like that this book touched on the fact that Blair didn't pursue her dreams in college for financial reasons. She wanted to retire her mom. And I think that was really important, and why people were so conflicted about why she wouldn't stay in New York if she was so clear and direct when it came to staying in New York and having this job that was going to be able to keep her and her mother financially stable. And I think something that I noticed, especially as a mentor for fellow students when I was in college, is that a lot of people do not choose their passion for the sake of being certain that they will be financially stable by the time that they graduate college. I mean, you're spending so much money, you're spending so much time on an education, and you just want to make sure that you'll be able to survive once you're out. And I mean, you guys know the stereotype with trying to become a writer is that you're going to be having a very hard time succeeding and getting yourself out there. I think you can almost see Blair trying to convince herself that this is what she wants. And when she returns back home, she sees everything that she was missing, so much of life that she could be enjoying. I mean, the second she's there, she picks up writing again. So I think that her decision comes very clear when things just start settling into place, where her mother is clear that she doesn't need her assistance, where she gets a home that she doesn't need to pay for, where she gets to be back with the love of her life. I mean, these pieces start falling into each other just so perfectly for her to stay. And then her perspective as to why she stopped being with Declan was also very important because of how his actions were reflecting so much of her absent father. And then again, what she pictured for her life out of necessity. And then for Declan, he also struggled with his family, with his father, trying to really make it with football and then having his dreams completely obliterated from an accident. So you could just definitely picture yourself being this like crazy, amazing, super hyper talented person whose dreams and reality, greatness was certainly going to happen to Declan. That just gets taken away, gone forever. And I think when you experience a loss like this, and it's depicted through Blair, but you can see it through Declan as well, where you're not the same person anymore and you're going through your emotions in such a lonely way. And he pushed Blair away. And then Blair also pushed Declan away by not further communicating with him. Yeah, the relationship crumbled, but the feelings were still there. And again, these are high schoolers. These are people who have not dealt with love and heartbreak, or rather they're experiencing these things for the first time. I honestly don't blame them for their dumb decisions. I just feel like put yourself back to when you were 17, or if you are 17 and then later in life you're going to realize how so many of your decisions came from just being stubborn or being prideful or being a little silly. Like, these things happen, and I really enjoyed seeing the fact that they were able to acknowledge years later how gravely they messed up. And even though so much time has passed, they're still so young. The problem that they had was so simple, but their feelings were very complex. All they needed to do was communicate. But of course, that's probably like the number one problem that people have when it comes to relationship. This wasn't just a really simple high school romance. This was a years-long friendship that turned into a relationship. They had their little ups and downs, and then they came back to each other. I think it's really quite simple. I really think that everything that's written in this book comes back around. It just makes a lot of sense to me. I think it's well written, and I am taking it for what it is. It's a super cutesy, fun YA romance. The hard words, I mean, Declan goes to express that Blair loves big words. He uses them sporadically, and then Blair also uses them throughout the book. His explanation of that, I feel like that goes to explain why she would use words like that, especially if she also wants to be an author. I don't know, there's just some stuff that I feel like are very clear, and they just come directly from the book, the explanation. So yeah, I think it's a really fun book. I don't know, like, read it by the beach, read it with your girlfriends. For a romance book, I would give this novel a 3.5 if I'm being strict, but if I'm not being strict, I would give it a 4. I don't really grade my romances too harshly because I really do like them as books that are fun. And I really do like the fact that this book didn't just touch on the funness of relationships and romance. But congratulations to Miss Haley, writing your first book. It must have been so exciting, especially holding your first copy.